Hello and welcome friends, I'm Gaurav Joshi and I would be teaching Indian economy in this semester. Before starting off, let me tell you that the subject name which has been specified in the syllabus is Indian economics. Actually that is a misspelling and the correct spelling is Indian economy. We are studying about the Indian economy and we are not studying about the economics as such. So we are basically going to talk about Indian economy in this particular subject. So please mind the difference between economy and economics. Our subject is Indian economics and I've told you that our subject is Indian economy and I've told you that Indian economics, which has been mentioned in the syllabus, has actually been misspelled, right? So whenever you write, you have to write Indian economy, right? This is the correct spelling which has been displayed here. Let me brief you about the syllabus before starting off. There are 5 units basically, and in the first unit we are going to talk about economy and we are going to talk about a few concepts. Some of these concepts you might have already covered in macroeconomics, and once we are through with the discussion on these concepts, we will move over to colonialism, British rule and exploitation of India under the British Empire. Colonialism, we are basically referring to the era wherein India was a colony of the Britishers. We are only not going to take up only the time from 1857 to 1947 where India was under the direct control of the British throne, but we are also going to take up the time span where India was almost under control of the British East India Company. So we'll be talking about that time span as well. We'll also talk about how this British rule or control by the British East India Company has been of some advantage to India and how has it also impacted India negatively. In the second unit that we talked about the nature of Indian economy. We'll understand what is a developing economy and then we'll see how India is a developing economy. We'll again understand what we mean by mixed economy and we'll understand how India is a mixed economy. We'll understand what dualistic economies are and then we'll see whether India is a dualistic economy or not. You would recall that you have read about mixed economies at least once in business environment, right? So I would expect you to have some basic understanding about what we know about, what we understand from mixed economy, what we can say that are the characteristics of the mixed economy. So that much would be expected from you. In unit 3, we'll be talking about public sector enterprises and we'll talk about private sector enterprises. I hope you know public sector enterprises are those business firms which have majority ownership by the government, majority control by the government, which means 50%, more than 50%, which means 51% or more. So if government has 51% or more ownership in a particular organization, particular business organization, then it is known as a public sector enterprise or a PSE or a PSU, public sector unit. On the other hand, if the majority control is in the hand of one private individual, one private business, or maybe a group of private businesses and the government stake is in minority, which means 49% or less, in that case, that particular enterprise is known as a private sector enterprise. I hope you know about the Tatas, for example. If you talked about Reliance, if you talk about companies like TCS, if you talk about Infosys, these are all private sector enterprises, for that matter Zomato as well. Then we'll be talking about the cooperative sector, wherein people cooperate with each other to set up a business enterprise and to engage in some activity which is mutually beneficial. So we'll be talking about cooperative sector as well, and we will understand why cooperatives are specifically suited to Indian conditions, why they are very, very important for Indian business environment, right? And then we'll move over to small scale sector. What is the meaning of small scale sector? Nowadays there is a lot of focus on small scale sectors, but what is the reason behind that focus? What is it that the small scale sector brings to table for the country or for the country's economy, and how does it contribute to the overall economic development or overall generation of employment in the economy, right? So we'll be talking about the small scale sector also in detail, and then we'll talk about their role and their performance and how they're important to the Indian economy. So that would be our discussion in Unit 3. In Unit 4, we'll be talking about poverty and employment. Poverty, India still, there is a lot of population below poverty line. In not only in percentage terms but also in absolute terms, India has a large chunk of globally poor people. So we have a large chunk of poor people, and we need to bring them out of the throes of poverty, and that is why we'll be discussing this in Unit 4. And then unemployment. Now this is something that should resonate with you well, because you'll be seeking jobs in a few months or a few years from now once you complete your graduation or post-graduation. So we'll be talking about unemployment also, and we have seen that unemployment has grown in last few years in India, and this has specifically been the case after 2020 March, when the corona pandemic struck. There's a lot of unemployment in India, and this is something that is a big issue for our policymakers. So we'll be discussing both these aspects, poverty and employment, what they mean, how they are calculated, and how they are relevant to Indian scenario, what is their importance for the overall well-being for the Indian economy, right? I hope that Unit 5, the discussion that will follow in Unit 5, you have already covered in business environment in semester 2, wherein you probably would have talked about industrial policies in much more detail. Therein you would have talked about industrial policy 1948, 56, then probably 1977 and 1980, and then 1991. Herein we are only going to talk about industrial policy 1956 and 1991 industrial policy, which is considered to be among the foremost reform of the Indian economic system. In fact, only a few days back, we celebrated the 30th anniversary of the 91 reforms. So we'll be discussing the Industrial Policy 1956 and Industrial Policy 1991, and we'll be talking about the industrial reforms that took place in 1991. We'll be talking about the LPG, that is liberalization, privatization and globalization. Some of this, as I said, you have already covered in business environment, and we'd also be taking care of industrial sickness. What do we mean by industrial sickness? Business firms not being able to operate in profit. That is what we know as industrial sickness. For a continued period of time, for a sustained period of time, if a business firm does not earn profit, then it becomes difficult for them to survive, and this is known as industrial sickness. So we'll understand what basically we mean by industrial sickness, technically what is the definition of industrial sickness, then what are the reasons behind industrial sickness, and what happens when a particular business grows sick, what is its impact on the overall economy. So this would be the discussion in Unit 5, right? Let me tell you right in the beginning that if you want to do well in this particular subject, and this is going to be a very important subject for your interviews also, even if you go for your MBAs or you go for job interviews after graduation, Indian economy is one subject which certainly will be asked. Why? Because most of the people who would be interviewing you, they would be reading the newspapers on a regular basis, and they would be very much aware of what is happening in the Indian economy. So they would be naturally inclined to ask questions from Indian economy, right? And as such, you are also required to keep going through the newspapers. If you are not going through the newspapers, then whatever we discuss, you would probably understand it, but you would forget it later. But if you are reading the newspapers on daily basis, many of the discussions which we'll have in our class, they would not even be required in your case because you would already know them. Fine. So for example, if you talk about the public sector, cooperative sector, or the small scale sector, there's a lot of emphasis on small scale sectors, and this has been the case in the last 1 decade or so, and there have been so many schemes. So you don't need to read about those schemes from the video lectures. If you are reading the newspapers on a regular basis, you already know what all schemes are running and what is the logic behind those schemes. So if you are reading newspapers, you would do well in this particular subject, and eventually in your interviews for job or for getting placed into a good management institute. But if somehow you're not reading the newspapers, life is going to be very, very difficult for you. I've said this to you earlier also, and I'm saying this same thing again, right? Now, let me also tell you what would be the assessment criteria. It would not be very different from whatever we are having in this particular semester. You will have your internal assessment exams offline. They would comprise 50% of the overall 30 marks that you have in your internal assessment, which means 15 marks they will carry. Then you have fortnightly assessments. I hope you know that every fortnight, every Saturday, you have to appear in a quiz, online quiz, objective online quiz. So that would be carrying a weightage of 5 marks in your overall score of 30 marks. And the lecture notes that you prepare every single day after watching the lectures and preparing on your own. You have to prepare 200 words lecture notes for every single lecture. So that will be carrying 5 marks. They will be inspected every Monday by the faculty members, and once the semester is over and you are through for your exams, then you have to submit these assignment copies so that these 5 marks can be awarded to you. So my advice to you is you should start maintaining an assignment copy only for Indian economy, which would be meant specifically for Indian economy as a subject, and you please keep noting down all the things. Then you will have a project work which you'll have to go to the field and will have to do. I'll give you a brief idea about this project work. So this would be the breakup of your 30 marks, and now let me give you a brief idea about the real life projects that you'll have to do. There are 8 different projects and they've been numbered from 1 to 8. Now what you have to do is you can pause your video here and you have to pick up one particular project and you have to do whatever has been mentioned there, and then towards the end of the semester you will have to make a presentation in the class on whatever you have learned while doing these projects. So what you have to do now is, today is 11th of August, Wednesday, and I am giving you time till Friday 13th of August. What you have to do is, you have to pick up one particular topic and you have to supply this information to your current CR, which is Mr. Neeraj Chand. And Neeraj Chand would then allot these topics on first come first serve basis, which means if a particular student is the first to opt for topic number 6, he will certainly be allotted that particular topic. Even if somebody later on, some student later on also asks for topic number 6, even then the person who opts for the particular real life project first would be given preference. Neeraj would have this responsibility. He will provide this information to Neeraj by 2 p.m. on Friday, that is 13th of August. And Neeraj will then, after doing the allotment, will send me the list on my WhatsApp number by 8 p.m. on the very day. On that very day means on 13th of August, Friday, by 8 p.m. in the evening, right? So this is how you'll have to do your real life projects. You'll have to also make a presentation towards the end. Fine. So I'm stopping here today. This was just to give you an idea, just to give you a flavor of what we are going to have in the coming sessions. And in the next lecture that we'll have tomorrow, I'll start off with my introduction in Unit 1. Thank you very much for your time.